Just in time.
So I see that it's 7 o'clock. I thought that I would wait just another minute to let people come in, and then I will officially get us started. Well, and of course, the last minute of waiting is the longest. So I think I will start here. Welcome, all of you. I am so grateful that you are here, and hopefully that this will be a good time of learning some about what we're doing and an opportunity for you to ask questions. My name is Anne Kirchmier, and I am the rector of St. Andrews in Newport News, and I'm also the chair of the Program Budget and Review Committee. Before we actually get into the meeting proper, I just wanted to say a couple of housekeeping things, but it looks like most of you already know them. One of them is that unless you're talking, it's very helpful if you keep yourself muted, because then we don't get a lot of background noise. Another one is, if this is helpful to you, in Zoom, there are two different views of people as we're together like this. One of them is a gallery view where you see everybody equally sized. And the other one is called speaker view, where the person speaking is the main part of the screen. And you may find it helpful to switch to speaker view if you're currently in gallery. And the way you do that, at least on the laptop, is if you go in the upper right-hand corner, it has the word view, and it toggles back and forth. So if you're in speaker view, well, that's interesting. I was going to say that because I'm speaking, I would be there, but in my speaker view, I'm seeing John Fogarty. So maybe that's not going to work quite that same way. Ann Turner, is there any rhyme or reason there?
No, it should, if you were in, as I am now, in speaker view.
Yeah, I can see you.
I see you. Yeah, sometimes it just, odd noises will make it hop around a little bit, so.
Or John wanted more attention or something. All right, so, okay. Anyway, so that's it for the housekeeping. While Anne is right here on my screen, I just wanted to say thank you to Ann Turner. She, behind the scenes, is doing amazing stuff for this whole council, and we're thrilled that you're hanging out with us tonight for the budget, so thank you. So I thought I'd begin with an opening prayer. The Lord be with you. Of course, you're all muted, and also with me. All right. Holy God, thank you so very much for our diocese, for the generosity of so many that enables us to come together with financial resources and to reach out in your name, supporting the churches in our diocese, and also offering support and help beyond ourselves. Thank you for those who take leadership in the finances of our department, of our diocese, and for those who tirelessly work behind the scenes. Be with us now as we look at the big picture of our finances, and guide us always in our decision-making, that we may truly be good stewards of the blessings you have given us. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So just to orient us a little bit, if you're somebody who has, how to raise your hand. So if you would like to raise your hand, there is on the bottom a participants. If you click on participants, and then On the right-hand side, you'll see participants listed, but in the bottom section, it will say raise hand, and you can click on that. However, I would request, because we're going to have two different opportunities in here to ask questions. So if you have a question about the presentation, it'd be helpful if you're willing to wait till we get to the question time, if that makes sense. You're welcome. So if you're somebody who's been to council before, you probably know that on Friday morning before council officially starts, there's usually a budget hearing, which is when the program review budget committee comes together and you can ask any questions you have. And then usually on Saturday morning at council is when there's a presentation of the previous year's financial information and the coming year's budget. And then normally we would vote then. So this year, just kind of, again, to get us oriented where we are, you've already received two really important pieces of information. And they were links in the email that you got today from the diocese. One of them is John Fogarty's excellent overview of the 2021 budget, which you also, if you attended a pre-council meeting, you were able to see that then. But again, it's in today's email link. The other thing that you also got a link to today is the spreadsheet that contains the proposed 2021 budget. If for some reason you didn't receive the email from the diocese, you can find these things on the diocesan website. There's an annual council page, and if you look in the daily reports section, you can find them. So what's going to happen tonight is I'm going to give a little bit of background about program budget and review. Then John Fogarty is going to give a little information. And then Judy Dobson will give a presentation about the 2020 financials and also a brief summary of the 2021 budget. You will have, as I said before, several opportunities to ask questions. Judy will pause twice during her presentation, once for questions about the 2020 information, and then at the end about 2021 or anything else that you want to ask about. So in essence, what we're doing right now is kind of a combination of the usual Saturday morning council budget presentation and the Friday morning hearing for questions. We're doing those together. And so then on Saturday, when we actually get to the business meeting for council, there will just be a very brief presentation of the budget because you've already had lots of opportunity to see it, and then we'll vote on the budget. Something else I want to say about tonight, if you end up with questions that you don't get a chance to ask for some reason tonight, or you think of another question later on, or if you're somebody who's watching the on-demand recording and so weren't here live, Judy and John and I are very happy to answer any questions that come up. Judy and John's information is on the diocesan website. You can just send them an email. And again, I'm at St. Andrews, Newport News, and if you send me an email, I'll do my best to answer your question. So, a little bit of background I have for you. One part is about the committee, the Program Budget and Review Committee. We are a standing committee of the Executive Board, and our charge is to oversee the diocesan finances. We make recommendations to the Executive Board. We prepare the annual diocesan budget for the Executive Board to approve. We meet with the auditors. We are an advisory committee only. The vote on the diocesan budget is done by diocesan council, not by us. And in between council, if there are budget tweaks that need to happen, our diocesan executive board does that voting and those changes. The members of the Program Budget and Review Committee are appointed by the bishop. And in addition to me, they are Charlie Bauer, Fred Bernhardt, John Dutton, and Scott Norris. And then also Judy Dobson, our comptroller, and John Fogarty, our treasurer. Couple of pieces of background about our budget that it's just helpful to keep in mind. By canon, the diocesan budget has to cover the ministry of the bishop and the program of the diocese, as that program is determined by the executive board. And then along with various other expenses like provincial and general convention delegates, an annual audit, that kind of thing, the budget has to cover all of those. Also by canon, our budget must be balanced. Then a little background about Judy and John. Judy Dobson and John Fogarty are two of the unsung heroes of our diocese. Judy often jokes about trying not to get into the weeds. If you're talking with her, she doesn't want to overwhelm people with too much detail, but she herself is an incredibly faithful caretaker of all of our financial details. Those details are not weeds to Judy. Every one of them matters. She's kind of like a gardener with a huge plot. She pays attention to what's happening in every area. She kind of transplants here, waters here. She moves this little fragile plant where it needs more sunshine. And she comes up with these amazingly resourceful solutions whenever we run into a financial challenge. Judy is focused not only on taking care of our diocesan finances, but also on supporting our parishes. It was Judy, for example, who took the initiative in setting up the cafeteria plan that can help your clergy, your staff, and your parish all save money on health insurance costs if anyone's paying a portion out of pocket. John Fogarty began his ministry as our diocesan treasurer in August. John is a big picture guy and a problem solver. He's also extremely modest. He single-handedly came up with a way to lower our diocesan staff health insurance expenses, which is something we've been trying to figure out how to do for years. He's working on plans to reduce costs for parishes by making use of economies of scale, which is the sharing of expenses. And he's raising really important questions for PB&R and the executive board to consider as we move forward. Like, how do we ensure that we have the financial capacity to carry out our mission? So we as a diocese are incredibly blessed by the ministry and the leadership of Judy Dobson and John Fogarty. All through this unprecedented pandemic year, they have responded to challenges and uncertainties with amazing skill and agility and faithfulness. They have been good stewards not only of the present moment, but also of our future, ensuring that we will have the resources to carry out our mission and ministry, not only in 2021, but in all the years to come. And I am so grateful for their ministry. So now I am going to turn it over to John Fogarty.
Well, you can probably tell I'm blushing after that introduction, Ian, but I'm very grateful to be of service to the diocese and hopefully to the parishes around the diocese, and look forward to serving for a number of years. Judy's done a fantastic job with this budget, and she has a great presentation for us tonight on 2020's results and a little bit of refresher on the budget. I know you saw the earlier presentation, or most of you did, and the detailed one is available to you, as Ian said. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Judy. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Anne, for those very kind words. And I'm going to just go ahead and jump into this as long as I can figure out how to get the share screen going. There you go. Can everybody hear? Okay. All right. The big story of the 2020 diocesan finances is a testament to your Episcopal beliefs. During a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, the congregations of Southern Virginia held firm to their pledge commitment to the diocese. Church pledges to the diocese were in line with the budget. As John Fogarty, our diocesan treasurer, said during his presentation to the convocations, this is remarkable considering the circumstances. Shown here are 2 letters I received from 2 churches. The letters remind me that God loves a cheerful giver. Paul Sessman, treasurer of Emmanuel Episcopal Church in Cape Charles, wrote on his church's pledge form, knowing that other churches are hurting financially at this time, we have upped our pledge to 11% to offer assistance to others. Benny Mason, treasurer at Emmanuel Jenkins Bridge, wrote check number 9228 in the amount of $1,150 is for our 4th quarter pledge to the diocese. It is $250 more than our usual contribution because our vestry voted last night to increase our final 2020 pledge. We are pleased to be able to contribute a few dollars more. Thank you, both Emmanuel churches, and I'd also like to thank all of you for your continual commitment to all the churches in the diocese. Now that you heard the big story of the diocesan finances, I'd like to tell you some smaller ones. This is a pie chart and it represents our total 2020 revenue. Each year, we have unbudgeted revenue, investment gains and losses, and budgeted revenue. Our unbudgeted revenue, represented here in orange, includes the forgiveness of our Paycheck Protection Program loan and the value of property contributed to the diocese as a result of church closings. This year, we received almost $623,000. Our investment revenue, represented in blue, represents our 2020 unrealized gains on our investments. Unrealized gains means that it's profit that exists only on paper. It would only be a realized gain if we sold our investments, which would be a bad idea. In 2020, our investments finished up the year 12.8%, but don't get too excited about that because the market could have gone the other way, as we saw in the 1st quarter of 2020, when our investments were down 13.8%. So let's take a look at our budgeted revenue. This is a pie chart representing our total 2020 budgeted revenue. This amount was a little more than 2.5 million. The darker portion, contributions, represents your pledge contributions to the diocese and the bishop's discretionary contributions. Another source of revenue was our investment funds in the form of quarterly distributions, seen here in yellow. These investment distributions support a host of ministries, including one of our largest ministries, Chenko on the James, our diocesan camp and retreat center. The program support revenue, represented in orange, was our smallest source of revenue in 2020. Although we budgeted over 100,000 in this category, the pandemic caused a lot of the events to be canceled. However, we did manage to slip in annual council last year. The designated and restricted funds can be seen on the pie chart in light blue. Designated fund revenue are those funds released by the executive board for particular expenses, and restricted fund revenue are those funds released from restricted because they meet the donor's restriction requirements. In 2020, we released funds to support college ministries, the bishop transition, annual council, and annual council scholarships. We also released funds to support the Boys Home and Jackson Field Behavioral Health Services. The property revenue, represented here in gray, is the income from our idle properties, mostly in the form of rental income. This pie chart represents the total amount of our 2020 budgeted expenses that were spent on various programs and supporting services. These expenses were a little more than $2.5 million. The Office of the Episcopate, which is in dark blue here, is the largest expense category, and it accounts for most of the staff compensation and supporting expenses. The support expenses, they include like diocesan property, vehicle, audit, legal, and rent expenses. The property expenses includes real estate taxes, insurance, and maintenance cost. The good news is we paid off our diocesan vehicle loan in 2020, and the audit and legal expenses were down considerably as compared to 2019. In 2020, we contracted with a new auditing firm that reduced our costs by over 50%. Legal expenses were also down by over 84%. As Sam Webster, our chancellor, reported last year at annual council, the Messiah case was decided in our favor, thus no pending litigation, and legal expenses decreased in 2020. Now let's take a closer look at ministries within our diocese. This category, which is here in light blue, makes up about 29% of our total expenses, which is a little more than $733,000. This pie chart represents the total amount of expenses spent on ministries within our diocese. The largest category, mission and parish support, found in blue in the upper right quadrant, includes expenses for communication grants. In 2020, we had a record number of requests for communication grants for obvious reasons, which is also a good thing. In May, the executive board of the diocese recognized this need and increased the budget line from $3,000 to $8,000. I'm happy to announce that by the end of 2020, we issued more than $10,000 in grant monies. The second largest category, found in the bottom left quadrant, also in blue, are expenses associated with our diocesan camp and retreat center, Camp Shanko on James. In 2020, we supported Shanko with over $100,000. Although Shanko's activities remain limited throughout the year due to the pandemic, the camp did host some events. Shanko replaced the traditional summer child campers with family campers and hosted events like Friendsgiving that had some fun outside activities, such as you see there in the picture, archery, and Food for the Soul. And I was told that that was truly a foodie paradise event. Now let's take a look at the third largest category under ministries within our diocese, outreach. Outreach is represented here in dark blue. In 2020, we continued our support to the prison ministry, Mission of the Holy Spirit, Covington Boys Home, Jackson Field Behavioral Health Services, Historic St. Luke's, and Westminster Canterbury Foundation. I'm also pleased to report that we gave out over $14,000 in college scholarships from the Bishop Vesche Fund. Despite some temporary college closures caused by the pandemic, the need for college ministry funds was still strong. The college ministry category, seen in gray on the pie chart, makes up 8% of our total expenses of the ministries within our diocese budget. In addition to our regular funding of $15,000 for each of the college ministries at Old Dominion University, College William Mary, and the combined ministries at Longwood University and Hamden Sydney College, we had additional requests for college ministry support. These funds came from the college program budget line. These funds were used to support student outreach trips, such as the one taken by Canterbury at William and Mary College. In early 2020, they traveled to Canterbury Cathedral in England. And you can see their smiling faces here on this slide. The college program funds also allowed students at Hamden Sydney and Longwood University to purchase groceries to make their own meals to avoid the potential overcrowded on-campus dining facilities. The United Campus Ministries at Christopher Newport University received funds to cover the cost of Bible study materials and seminar fees. Canterbury at Old Dominion University used funds to enhance their ministries by purchasing a camera, a projector, and a screen. Now that we looked at how we spent money on ministries within the diocese, let's go back to the 2020 expense report. Expenses under the partnership and contributions category seen in the pie chart in yellow represents 11% of our total expenses. These expenses are associated with our partnership with the wider Episcopal Church, the Virginia Interfaith Center, the Church Periodical Club, and our newest partnership, the Union of Black Episcopalians. In 2020, as in the past 3 years, we continued to honor a pledge of 15% to the wider Episcopal Church. Our two smallest expense categories are governance in orange and communications in gray. Governance expenses are those expenses incurred while doing the work of convention, diocesan executive board, and standing committee. Communication expenses are those expenses associated with e-news, constant contact, and Zoom. These expenses are essential for spreading the news of our churches throughout the diocese. So given all this activity during the year, what does our balance sheet look like as of the end of 2020? Well, here it is. Our total assets are a little more than 21,718,000. Most of our assets consist of investments. The investment line is the second line under assets. Of our investments in cash, the cash line is the first line under assets. A little more than 12,892,000 is restricted, and a little less than 4,808,000 has been designated by the executive board for various purposes. As you can see on the unrestricted funds line, the fourth line up from the bottom, a little less than 4 million of our assets are unrestricted. Of this amount, a little more than 3,100,000 is property and property held for sale, leaving us with a little less than $900,000 available in unrestricted assets. This sums up the balance sheet, and to sum up the story of the 2020 diocesan finances is we lived within our budget, and we have a financially healthy diocese with substantial cash going into 2021. And that is my presentation on the 2020 finances. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at this time. Anne, do you see any questions? No? Okay. Well, let's move on then to the 2021 budget.
Judy,
Yeah.
Judy, it's John. I think
Yep.
Ellen Gilliam has a question. She's
Okay.
waving.
Okay. Go ahead, Anne.
May I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely.
I found the unmute button. When you calculate 5% of a rolling average,
Mhm.
is that the average of investments or the average of investments in cash and cash equivalents?
It's the rolling average of our investments over a 5-year period.
So, but usually in investments, you have stocks and bonds and stuff,
Yes.
and then you have cash, like in a brokerage fund.
Yeah.
So does it include the cash as well as the stocks and bonds? Does it include
Yeah.
it includes any
Yeah.
distribution, any cash? It's what's in that fund.
Yes, that is correct.
But
And most of our funds that we have, it's with the Diocesan Foundation, the Southern Virginia Diocesan Foundation.
I think a follow-up to that question, I'm trying to understand how you calculate and also how a vestry should think. Do you include restricted funds in that rolling average?
Yes, it would be calculated in, to be honest with you, the calculations are so complex that Bank of America has to come up with our spending policy for us. So I don't have the expertise to do that. I get the people that do have the expertise to do that, to do those calculations for me.
But it's basically based on what a private individual would consider the value of a stock brokerage account.
Yes, it would. Yeah,
not your checking account, but just the stock brokerage account.
that's correct.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate your time.
And it's John Fogarty. Just to add to that, I think that typically endowments use anywhere from 3 to 5% for distributions.
Mhm.
So if you start to get more than 5%, you run the danger of depleting the endowment. Although, in the last few years, the market's gone up so much, you might be tempted to do so, but you have to look at the long-term rate of return.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about the 2020 finances? All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the 2021 budget. And again, this is going to be very brief because John did a great job with his video. And I want to make sure that we can get all the questions in tonight, if anyone has any. But there's a lot of numbers on the screen, but I just want to draw your attention. The actual proposed budget is here on the far right in light blue. The reason why all these other figures are on there is because basically the pandemic, and I wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to see, well, what's a normal year look like? A normal year looks like, you can see that in the far left column under the 2019 revenue and expenses. And then the 2020 budget and the 2020 actual revenue and expenses are included in there just for comparison purposes. Let me further explain some figures that you might have questions about. Again, John did a great job, so I want to just be brief in these. The contributions budget, which is the first line under the revenue heading, you can see that it's about 7% lower than our 2020 budget. And again, this is just because of the pandemic. We've gone conservative on this. We're just not sure what the future holds, so we wanted to take a cautious approach. The program support budget, which is the second line, the program support budget, which is the first line under the contributions budget line, is significantly lower than the 2020 budget. And this is because we're now hosting the annual council virtually. And in past years, of course, we held it in person. But when we hold it virtually, we definitely cut costs. So that's why it's considerably lower. And then the expenses related to annual council, you can see that under the governance expense line, which is the third line up from the total expense line. The investment distributions budget, which is the next to last line under revenues heading, is lower than our 2020 budget. Traditionally, we followed the 5% spending policy on all our invested funds. And at the end of each year, those funds we did not spend go back and become reinvested. Well, this year we'll continue to follow the spending policy, but only on those designated and restricted funds that we need the full amount of the 5% spending policy. The designated and restricted funds budget, which is the last line under the revenue heading, has significantly increased because of this change and because it includes the $200,000 contingency to support Camp Schenko in the event that Schenko can't operate normally this year. And hopefully, Schenko has been applying for a lot of assistance through government programs. So we're hoping that not all of this 200,000 contingency will be needed. And one last note on this budget, and then we'll get to questions, is this budget really makes a concerted effort to prepare us for future years. Some of our expenses are really savings for expenses that will occur next year or even years from now. An example of that is on the governance expense line, the third line up from the total expenses. It contains a expense line for bishop search and transition. We are beginning this year to plan for another bishop search that hopefully will not happen for another 8 to 10 years. The youth ministries expense line, the fifth line down under the expense heading, has an expense line for the Episcopal youth event. This event will not take place until 2023. And expenses like these are placed in a reserve account and are withdrawn when needed under the designated and restricted funds budget line. And that concludes my presentation of the budget, and we will take questions now.
I could ask folks to use the raise hand tool. We have multiple screens of participants. It makes it easier for us to find you. I have a question from Dave Holtgreave.
Yes, yes, thank you. I'm the treasurer of St. Martin's, and one of the difficulties we've had, especially this year, is you folks asked for our commitment of our pledge to the diocese on the 1st of December, and it's really difficult to get those numbers, and that's probably why I'm usually late all the time, because I'm really doing a swag of, because especially in the pandemic, we found that there's been a reluctance to make the commitment to a pledge. However, our donations are still coming in. And so I was wondering, is there any give there in future years to maybe make it like 1 January something? We try to make the best commitment we can, but it just, like in the beginning of December, I just don't have all the numbers to really do that. And I was just wondering if other people experience that, or if there's any way we can approach that better.
Dave, that is such a great question. And it's one that certainly, I mean, it affects me everywhere I've ever been as a rector, trying to get the pledge in on time. Where we get stuck is that it's a canonical requirement. And so Judy, feel free to leap in here. Trying to think I don't have the canon in front of me, but we're bound by the canon, which makes it hard.
Okay. Yeah, we try to do the best we can, and I keep holding off because every week I try to go, okay, what are the pledges for this week? And then I do it. However, what I do say to the vestry and what I do say in our note to Judy when we make our commitment is as we go through the year, if we were off on our revenue projections, is that St. Martin's will increase their pledges, though we haven't been able, we've been increasing them each year, but we haven't been able to do that mid-year, unfortunately.
That makes sense. We really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Judy, can I ask you, would you mind stopping sharing your screen just so we can see each other and then? Yeah, thanks. It's not looking like there are very many other questions.
No raised hands.
No raised hands.
No.
So are we allowed to end early if? All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that means, Judy, you did such a great job that nobody had any questions. So, so thank you. Thank you all very much. And thank you for coming. And again, if anything comes to mind, if you have any questions that come up, Judy, John, or I can certainly do our best to answer them. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Oh, Roy has a question.
No, I think he's clapping.
Oh,
Thank you, Roy. All right. Well, blessings all. Have a good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, Anne.